And we are recording at the Healing Mastery Summit, and I'm here with Dr. TK. Thank you, Dr. TK, for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, buddy. It's my pleasure to be on here.
Yeah, I'm excited to speak to you because we got a lot to talk about and a lot of knowledge and value to share. Like, you bring a ton of knowledge with you from one, just like your background of where you came from and how you came to America, but also you were a pharmacist. And so we're going to get into that a little bit. So, but first, that's the first thing I'd actually like to get into. And then I'd like to get into your background a little bit as well, because I think there's some healing there, or if you want to call it harmonizing, right? Healing, we call this the Healing Summit, but wholeness or harmonizing might be a better way of putting it, but just people resonate sometimes more with healing. But you were a pharmacist. You're a pharmacist for how many years?
Been a pharmacist for 15 years. Can you believe that?
Yeah. So let me just give everybody the rundown before we go into it. So you're known as the quantum pharmacist, and you're a functional energy medicine expert. And you have a doctor of pharmacy and a fellowship in anti-aging and regenerative functional medicine. Using a combination of ancient energy medicine techniques and advanced technologies, you've created Coherence bioinformation frequency creams that liberate minor aches and pains in 60 seconds via emotional stress pathways, and your company's mind-body matrix. And so the mission is to help everyone find peace and live a pain and stress-free life. And so, so for those listening, I've known TK for a while, and I've used this cream, and we're going to get into that. Like, how does cream automatically dissolve pain? But I was doing an interview with one doctor, Dr. Jennifer Daniels, and she said, for every medication, every dollar that we spend on medication, we spend $3 treating the symptoms. And so you were working in a pharmacy in the San Francisco area, correct?
Fresno, sorry.
Fresno, okay. So Fresno area.
It's in California.
Yeah, somewhere over there.
Yes.
I'm on the East Coast. So you started to realize something, right? So you were doing this, you were, doling out medication as, you do as a pharmacist. And then what happened?
A lot. We were one of those pharmacy who was at the edge of everything in terms of educating our patient, but we were pushing the boundary of treating the patient without any kind of discrimination. And we grew so much so fast that we built all these relationships with the doctors in our community. So we were helping them in every way to make their time with their patient more successful, and the result and outcome for their patient was more successful. And so we were doing compoundings, we were teaching them about their adrenal, about their lifestyle, and we were dispensing the prescriptions. And before you know it, we became this gigantic pharmacy that became the center of attention in the valley. And we were growing so much, we were dispensing so much opiate on top of that, that we became the attention with the DEA, and they came in, raided our pharmacy, took all our record, and then took them over a year and a half to go through every single one of our prescription and examine it with laser focus. And then what happened was, before you know it, they couldn't find that we did anything criminal, we didn't do anything wrong, but they found that we made a lot of errors in terms of how we were dispensing the prescription. So they went through and looked for the dotting the I and the T and the dates and the signature and checking the box and everything. And one of the things that was happening was that we were inside a large clinic where there was about 30 practitioners. And during that time when we started our pharmacy, the transition from old style paperwork record keeping, transferred to the new electronic medical record system. And they were just giving us the prescription with their tablets, and they were signing it with their pen. So the DEA went through and said, hey, any prescription that was written for, let's say, sleep medication, ADD meds, pain medication, any muscle relaxant, any anti-anxiety drugs, anything that belongs in the schedule, if they signed it with that electronic signature versus a wet ink pen, then we are fined $25,000 for every single one of those prescriptions. And they went through, if the doctor didn't check out the number of boxes of prescription and we dispensed it, they fined us $25,000 for that. So they went through and fined every single mistake. The end result was that they wanted $101 million
What?
from our pharmacy.
Oh my God.
From an independent pharmacy. So basically they just wanted to shut us down through those type of error. And we got a lawyer and we decided that we could go to federal court and bring on every single one of these doctors that has written a prescription for us and said that they wrote it and they charted and they are legitimate prescription. Those were just paperwork error. But we didn't want to drag all our doctors into court and waste all that time too. So what we did was we settled with the DEA, and they basically end up saying that we'll take $200,000 for our time of investigating your pharmacy for the last 2 years, and we'll call it even. So that's kind of like what changes how we did things in our pharmacy, but it also changes my path into how bureaucratic the system is, because you're there trying to help people, changing their life, trying to get them off of opiates and trying to change their prescription into a compound and or a cream or whatever. And so it made me think about the whole medical system overall. I was one of those that I've been focused on trying to look at different ways of treating pain, but it really fired me up to find a better solution. So I went on this whole journey of looking into the true path of medicine and what is it that we can do that is more powerful than the prescription system without the side effect. And so I went on this whole energy medicine journey. And the other thing that happened to me during that a couple years prior to that kind of switched my thinking was when my wife ended up in the emergency room at Kaiser, paralyzed from the neck down without any type of physical injury. And I end up in that emergency room staring into the emergency room doctor's eyes and say, what is going on, given that they have taken their time doing MRIs, CTs, all the blood work, and they can't find anything that's wrong. Everything seems normal to them. And they have ruled out heart attack, they ruled out stroke, they ruled out kidney failures. They pretty much didn't have an answer, and their last resort was just to admit her into the intensive care units and watch her. And so at that point, I was already in my journey of biofeedback medicine and energy medicine, and I started thinking about what Joe Dispenza book, You Are the Placebo, really taught me about the intentions and about healing. And so in that emergency room, I convinced the emergency room physicians to let me do what I was really good at and how I can use technology and biofeedback and intention to help my wife. And so they walked out of that bed room that she was in and let me treat her the way that I do it. And so I used the biofeedback smart PMF 10s unit
Mm-hmm.
and just start scrubbing and clearing out all her energy blockage and using the intention and my intention to help my wife. In about 4 to 5 hours, she started to move, and her toes and then her fingers, and then she sat up just like that. And if I didn't take any kind of action that day or did not have the right technology, then the course of that day would have been totally different than where we are today. And what it made me realize was that it took that night, we walked out of that emergency room. It's way unusual for anything like this to happen, but we defy the odd. And so it made me look into what is the real power of energy medicine, biofeedback, intention, and how do we incorporate that into a new way to help people. And so that already started my path of looking into doing all this. And then this whole DEA thing happened, and so made us push our way and rethink about what we want to do and how do we want to invest our time and passion into what we wanted to do. And so we decided that we're going to leave our pharmacy after that and focus on our newfound passion, purpose, mission, that we can try to help so much more people going online, creating a system and a cream that help people really harness their own internal energy system and go through the whole recovery process. And how does that connect to their psycho-emotional component with the pain? And how do we help them go through all that? And that was part of our journey into where we are today. And a lot of that journey was meeting you in some of our networks.
Yeah, awesome. So I've been a part of the journey, and I've seen actually the evolution of it, which has been amazing. Now, it's been, well, obviously it's actually something that we can see nowadays, which is that people are getting more and more prescriptions, but more and more people are getting sick. So obviously something is broken. So you can easily just see like, well, wait a minute, our medical system keeps growing and getting bigger, and more people get sick and sick. So how does that work? If medicine works, if the medical system is working, then shouldn't people be getting healthier and healthier? So what's happening with this situation? Like, what's going on in your opinion?
I think the conventional medical system in terms of a pill for an ill is great in an acute setting, but it may not be the best solution for chronic illness and prevention setting. The pills, we don't have a pill for prevention. What we need to do is teach people about their lifestyle, about what they should be eating and what they should be avoiding, and how they can change their mindset and their spirituality to really create a prevention system and a functional health living system versus waiting to get sick and then you're given a pill, and then before you know it, the pills are too powerful that their side effect will lead to disruption of the other body system, leading to disease states of the other body system. Then that is how we end up with starting out with one pills, and then before you know, in 5 years, more than 80% of the people will end up with more than 5 pills, and that's the medical system that we've been taught, been regulated, pushed into. But we haven't do enough in terms of educating our people.
So you brought up spirituality because, that's an ongoing theme. It's something that I talk about in my book because I think it's directly correlated with disease and sickness. And did you get to a point where you became spiritual, or have you always known yourself to be spiritual?
I have always known myself. I'm not a spiritual person in term of religion, but I'm a spiritual person in term of who I am and how I come through in my heart and my mind. And I have always been in many ways raised and born with this internal fire to really love people and give them that unconditional love and treat everybody the best that I can. And so that is my definition of my spirituality is coming from my heart. And how do I treat people, and how do I love people, and how do I give them the best wisdom I can.
Yeah. So to go back to your story, which we haven't brought up here, which is you were a political refugee, right?
Correct.
And then you went to, I believe it was China. You stayed in a refugee camp in China, was it?
Yeah, we lived in a fishing village that's about 2 hours south of Da Nang in South Vietnam. And
How old were you?
my dad was a fisherman, and I was at 6 years old. He came home one night from his fishing trip and just took his whole family and got on the fishing boat, and we just sailed up the South China Sea heading toward Hong Kong.
Wow.
We were at sea for about 2 weeks. Along the way, what I remember at 6 was I can see that they were trading watches and jewelries for water and diesels and along certain islands. And by the time we ran out of everything, we were so close to Hong Kong that we got picked up by a British cargo ship. And they took the children and women on board, and then they dragged the boat with the men into Hong Kong harbor. And there we were processed as refugees, and we stayed inside the refugee camps for 2 years. We got sponsored by a church in Texas, and before you know it, they flew us to the United States, and we end up in Fresno because my dad somehow got in communication with his friend. His friend has some migrant job up here in Fresno for farmings and stuff like that, and we kind of end up here working as migrant farmers.
Wow. So that's an unbelievable story that makes me like kind of gives me chills, because now you've made it to the US, and first off, that must have been somewhat traumatic for you, right? Everything that you had ever known was just boom, gone. And then you're in a camp. And so was there did you deal with trauma? Did you have to kind of resolve that? Was there pain with that?
I because I was 6, I started to develop a lot of that memory already, and they became ingrained into my memory. But part of that, luckily, because I was a kid, I saw it as a fun process. It was more of discovery, a journey, and it wasn't something that was terrifying. Luckily for us, we did not encounter pirates that would raid and rape the women and all that stuff and kill people.
Yeah.
We were very fortunate in terms of that process. And so I did not have to deal with that as a traumatic process, but more of an exploration, learning, fun experience. But it's definitely was things that was going on that has very profound events that get imprinted into your life.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you think that was like a catalyst for the direction that you took when you got here? Like, was it like, okay, now I'm going to become a doctor, or how did that come about? Like,
It was definitely an a big, profound experience for me as a whole to see where my parent came from and what they have to endure and go through to get us to the United States, because they believe that there is better opportunity here.
Yeah.
And so that has always been the drive for me to study harder and stay focused. And then part of my experience was transferring from uh, a person, a pharmacist, a career into an entrepreneurship. And who I am today was because of my parent. And I, it made me realize a few years back how profound an effect my father had for me, because as an entrepreneur, because moving from migrant worker, he came home with a old, really beat up truck, whatever he could afford at that time, and an old lawnmower, and said, "This is our new business. We're gonna start knocking on people's door, asking them if they want us to mow their lawn for them."
Yeah.
And at that time, I was probably at about 11 years old, and I remember every single night was sitting there just copying the same ads instead of a photocopier for our lawn service, and writing it by hand and then putting it inside a plastic bag and knocking on people's door and giving them the flyer, asking them for service and business. And then the whole journey of working with my dad, asking for jobs and interpreting between for him and the English speaking customer, that became part of me, who I am as an entrepreneur, as looking and understanding what people are telling me and reinterpreting it in a different way and connecting things together. So
Cool,
that's
man.
that was kind of like where we end up.
Yeah. So now along I want to talk about the stress and emotional. So I was going to kind of tie that together in terms of like stress and emotional issues that maybe you brought with you, but it sounds like you've gotten all those things resolved. But there are people on here listening and watching this that maybe have deep emotional issues that haven't been resolved. And those emotional issues end up manifesting in pain or, snags along the way and little confusions and lack of clarity and all those things. And so, or dis-ease, a discomfort, right? So
Yes.
your cream helps kind of cater to that in a way. Now,
Yes.
what, in your opinion, what is emotional stress? Like how do you determine what that is? Like if someone didn't even know they had it, do you know like how they would come to the revelation that it's there?
I believe that probably 99% of our average consumer or population don't understand the whole consequences of our daily stress and how that affects our body, our aging process, our disease process. And luckily for me was that because I after my pharmacy degree, when I opened up our independent pharmacy, I did my study in anti-aging, regenerative, and functional medicine. And most of that focus was on the endocrine system. How does that evolve into our hormones, our stress system? And
Yes.
I did, that was where my focus and my specialization ended up. And I started counseling so many patients in the pharmacy and educating them about their stress. And on top of that, we were doing a lot of cortisol salivary testing to measure their cortisol level to really understand their stress pattern and which phase of the stress that they have gone through. And because of my background and my education, my knowledge, I was able to understand myself a lot more, and I did my own measurement and really understand what factors affect our stress
Yeah.
physically and emotionally and mentally.
Yeah.
And so I looked at all that, and I had worked in so many ways and have so many gadgets and modality that really helped me manage these things and understand it.
Yeah.
And so for me as an individual, that was my personal health journey in terms of really understanding that, but also how did I apply that into new concept, into this new company, this new cream to help people.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how we derive the mind body energy connection to pain and stress.
Gotcha. So, so how is there like a cascade system? So for those of the people that are listening that don't know, the endocrine system is like triggering hormones, right? It's transporting hormones, et cetera,
Yes.
neurotransmitters, those things like dopamine, serotonin, et cetera, right?
Yes.
So how is stress affecting the whole endocrine system? Like, can you give an example of like a cascade of events that may happen for somebody that's listening, like whether it's acute emotional trauma or maybe just daily stress?
Yeah, that'd be great. We'll go through the difference between both.
Okay.
First one is the acute system,
Yeah.
where let's say, for example, we have a lion chasing at us, and immediately we go into a fight and flight mode that everybody is familiar with. Then in that, our adrenal medulla inside our adrenal gland that sits on top of the two kidneys,
Mm-hmm.
they produce epinephrine and norepinephrine, and that's our rush neurotransmitter to really stay focused on what's going on, so that way we can run and hide or fight with the lion. And then inside is the adrenal cortex, then it produces cortisol. Cortisol shoot up, so that way we can be more alert and more vigilant. And that generally happen after we high. We should then go back down in terms of those neurotransmitter and the hormone cortisol.
Mm-hmm.
Then we should be back to what we call homeostasis.
Yeah.
And in the comparison of the daily stress, the emotional stress, the errand that we have to run, the things that we have to do, taking the kids to school, dropping off at their different ball games, dealing with our boss, dealing with our business, dealing with the bills, and dealing with everything else that's going on in our life, that is the long-term daily stress that can be mental, that can be emotionally, that can be physical.
Right.
And they play a small amount in terms of everything. And what happened is, in the long-term aspect of thing, a little bit of epinephrine, the norepinephrines jump up, a little bit of cortisol jump up. But if that is the bar, the next day, the next month, the next year, that bar goes up higher and higher. And then before you know it, we have this high rush adrenaline and cortisol system
Right.
that affects our sleep, affect our focus, affect our inflammatory process. Then the inflammatory process then affect all the rest of our disease states, and how we control and prevent these disease states in terms of high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, diabetes. So we have those effects. And that is where we need to help people understand and really manage all that.
Yes.
And then how does that can affect their pain? How does the acute trauma affect their pain? How does the long-term emotional trauma affect their pain? And so we need to find and lower a different state in terms of homeostasis, where the cortisol and the adrenaline balance out with the, in terms of the sympathetic system versus the parasympathetic, the resting versus the fight and flight state.
Right. Yeah. Awesome. That's a great explanation. Good understanding. So people essentially, if they're in the sustained threat response, can end up with adrenal fatigue, and then other things can pop up. Right. So, I mean,
Yes.
essentially, if it affects your sleep, then it could creep the head of cancer can pop up, right? Because if you're not sleeping correctly, your immune system's not functioning. So, is that kind of it sets the stage for a lot of other things to happen, correct?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, the whole body pH, the whole inflammatory process, how the immune response, everything begins to go down.
Yeah.
And it gets bad when everything is out of control.
Yeah, so I'm glad that you brought all this up because a lot of people think that they're victims, right? And this is probably what you would explain to their patients
Hmm.
is like, I'm a victim of this circumstance, and then the doctor is my savior, and the doctor has medication, and that medication is going to correct me, and then everything's going to be better, and then
Hmm.
that doesn't happen. Then all of a sudden it's like, wait, my blood pressure went up, or some other numbers are off, and now you need another medication. And the reality is that it's all in the stress, right? It's all in
Correct.
controlling those things. So how does, for example, like, you know, how would a cream that is imprinted with a frequency affect any of that, or frequencies in general? Because and before we get into that, just to go over in case anybody's new to this, because they sometimes people get like they get freaked out or weirded out about frequency talk, but this is all proven. We're all vibrating beings. Our brain, certain brain centers vibrate at a certain frequency, certain organs vibrate at a certain frequency, so we are frequency. So with that being said, how would a cream help somebody? Like, how is that possible?
Yeah, so I'm gonna take one step back and explain the whole frequency of things. So heart math, neurobands, and aura ring, they all are different measuring devices. Fitbits, your Apple Watch, they all measure certain minute markers using the body electrical system.
Yes.
That's kind of like how EKG works. Our cell phone works through certain frequency. Our Wi-Fi works through certain frequency to pick up the information that's everywhere, and it's the computer chip that get reinterpreted.
Right.
So our body should vibrate in a very homeostatic uh, frequency, what we call coherence frequency, the
Yes.
individual vibration. So the heart, the eye, the throat, the head, the brain cavity, then the different organs, and they all vibrate at very coherent, specific frequency.
Yeah.
And that one frequency will add to another frequency that harmonize and make a bigger organ from a cell base to the organ base. And they should vibrate and send out information in terms of waves and frequency in that information, in that coherent aspect. But when we have disease states, we have, let's say, toxin, heavy metals, bacteria, viruses, mold, and injury, uh, emotional blockage, they all then can disrupt the vibrational frequency, which become what we call incoherence information, meaning that instead of going from a coherent vibration that is very smooth, now we have jagged spikes that goes like this.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we call incoherent vibration. And using biofeedback, we can detect and pick up and interpret these information that are very specific to as to what is going on many time in each of the meridian channels or each of the organs. That's
Yeah.
where all the Russian and German biofeedback technology comes from.
Yeah.
And that's how they were doing it. And there's huge clinical correlation to that. So they're the next step then is to move to low PEMF technology, which is low pulse frequency, that are not harmful, but they're coherent information that matches up to the different organs. So there's over 4,000 studies on PEMF frequency that can regrow bones, regrow nerve, muscle tissue, reheal and the body. And so all that are based off of frequency. And what happened is when I started looking at these frequency, I looked at the psycho-emotional component, the body, how our trauma, our abuse from our childhood or an acute car accident can lead to a traumatic event that leads to the disruption of these frequency. And if we can pick up these frequency through biofeedback measurement, then we understand and know what the incoherence vibration is. And we just have to find the right coherence information and apply it onto the cream. And when you apply it onto the body goes, oh, okay, I understand. That's how I should be vibrating. And then it start to correct itself because we're
Mm.
giving it the information to override. And when the body corrects itself, it becomes more coherent. It goes into a more homeostatic state. And then that's where the recovery process and the whole body as a whole should operate the way that it was designed to.
That's awesome. That's a great explanation. And I just made a connection. I mean, I've had this connection before, but when you were talking about the 4,000 studies of the pulsed electromagnetic frequency to regrow bone, tissue, etc., it just hit me that, you know how babies, when they're orphans, if they don't get held, they can either die or they don't grow, even if they're fed.
Yeah.
That literally the mother's energy is what's causing the baby to grow. And so in essence, these frequencies can help replace that energy, or they're basically like synthetic frequencies that are stimulating these type of cells, right?
Yes.
Could that connection be made in essence?
Yes, it's very true, and we see that in clinical practice from many doctors, and I see that when I was in the pharmacy seeing and consulting a lot of patients. What we see is that the mother and the baby from pregnancy will share the same vibrational frequency,
Mm-hmm.
and even when we were doing scans of the energy field for the baby, a lot of that represent what was going on with the mother.
Mm.
So if the mother was going through traumas and stress, the baby will pick that up too,
Yes.
because they were both vibrating. Now they're, even if they're separate entity, they both can be vibrating in coherent frequency if it's good or bad. And so, yeah, what happens to the baby affects the mother, and what happens to the mother affects the baby.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I have a coach that used to see, I forget what the technology is called, but they would be able to see inside the womb during certain reactions. And he worked for a biomedical field company. And they actually would notice that when the mother was under stress or anxiety, the baby would actually masturbate, like
Wow.
to relieve
To
anxiety.
really, oh wow.
Yeah, and then if the mother smoked or did other things, that it would make certain. Anyways, there was a correlation with what the mother was doing and the facial expressions and the
Hmm.
actions of the baby, and so we're all connected. And so, 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 with that being said, have you seen people who have just carried on the trauma of their mother and not necessarily encountered trauma, but they're carrying on that energy or signature or frequency into their life with them that can be resolved?
Yes. In many ways, I call that the entangled soul
Mm.
phenomenon. Basically, there has been clinical studies in neuroimmunology and neuropsychology that shows that trauma, very shocked event that did not get resolved or did not have a resolution, get shocked into, imprinted into the genetic structures of the DNA.
Mm.
The DNA then carried this traumatic event information and transfer it to different generation.
Mm.
So right now they're saying that it's about 7 generation back.
Yeah.
So we're talking about our great 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 grandparent
Yeah.
can go through a very traumatic event and pass on to us. And so that's where a lot of people then have all these chronic psycho-emotional issues, a lot of addiction, a lot of pain, can be any one of those shocking events that showed up. And if we don't have the proper help, the right psychological help and support, the right environment, the right surrounding, then it can affect us in terms of how we express it or suppress it.
So how is that resolved? Like if somebody says, for example, the people who went through Nazi Germany, the Jews, you know, there's a lot to be said of that trauma is passed down, and you can actually see it in the behavior of some of these children. Like they actually a lot of them end up being super successful. But how does something like that get resolved? Do you have any answers for that? Like, how does that come to a resolution?
Yeah, from my research and finding, what I looked at is, so definitely psychotherapy. A lot of that has to work through our emotion, what we're feeling, what's going in deep down inside.
Yeah.
NLP, tapping and stuff like that will help us reframe the story.
Okay.
And hypnosis, all that can definitely help, and regression type of therapy. But in terms of looking at technology, biofeedback, and all that stuff, we look at how those imprint leads to the energy blockage in the meridians or the relative tissue or organ in the body. When we pick that up, then we can see what is inside what we call the human body field hologram.
Right.
Basically, if we are vibration, then this vibration is out in our field, and that's kind of how different culture sees auras and chakras.
Right.
And different culture sees meridian channels and acupuncture points. They're all kind of the same communication system.
Yep.
But if there's distortion in these things, then we can pick them up and try to put them back into their right field, their right correcting the auras and the chakras and the energy blockage in the meridians. Then that help liberate. That's why we put in some of the frequency in our cream that has to do with letting go. It's how do we liberate our emotional blockage? Yes. And then create coherence in the heart and the mind, so that they're both at once and there is not a conflict in each other. Then people can have that reframing inside their body, inside their mind and their heart, to be able to move forward.
Yeah.
And it's about taking them out of that fight and flight state and put them into that state of unconditional love and peace.
Yeah. So that's why acceptance and surrender is so powerful, right? Because you're basically opening up these energy channels to download, almost intake this kind of energy that we have access to all the time. Would you say that to be true? Like whatever the source energy or whatever you want to call it. Otherwise, if we're tense and tight, we're kind of blocking that off. Is that that a way of saying it?
Yeah, cool. Definitely. And who I found out is really good at that is Joe Dispenza.
Yeah.
His meditation is about correcting and harnessing each of those energy center. And how do we go into what we call the quantum realm, and really down low and be one with the universe and let go of all that that's going on. That's holding us back.
You did a meditation with him, right?
Yes, I did his week-long retreat on meditation, and they were intense. Some day was one of the meditation sessions was about 5 hours long.
Wow. And any revelations from that?
Huge. I'm a big meditation practice person now, and especially when I travel, I'll do my meditation for an hour or more in the morning, and then sometime in the afternoon, and then at night. So it's been a big game changer, and so I'm incorporating a lot of that meditation method along with the frequency, along with reframing our story in a meditation for pain and stuff like that.
Gotcha. Okay, so we're almost to the bottom of the hour here. So I want to get to because I know your time is valuable. I want to get to most of the people that are here watching. Probably have some type of stress. They're trying to heal from something or harmonize with something, and so that's the root cause of almost all disease. If you want to get to the bottom of it, right? So what can they do? We're talking about meditation. Not everybody's like, oh yeah, I'm going to start meditating. Like, what can they do now to start to de-stress or just come back into harmony with nature?
I would say, if you could just bypass the stigma of meditation, just think of it taking a 15-minute walk outdoor and really think about what is going on out there and really start to enjoy things in terms of gratitude. What are you grateful for in your life? What are you grateful for in nature? What are you grateful for? And just reframe everything that is in the negative into a positive aspect.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like your walking meditation. And then you start there, and then you can start with like 5 minutes quiet sit down breathing, like the Wim Hof breathing method, different type of breathing method, just to calm your nervous system down and put your vagus nerve into that parasympathetic tone. And then just appreciate whatever that comes up in your mind and say, okay, I appreciate it, and what is going on, I appreciate you letting me know. Now you can move on forward. Start reframing your mind and retell the story, and your life changes.
Awesome. I know it has for me. Meditation's been a big part of my healing process too. I've gone through ups and downs with it, but some of the studies have shown that the immune system response can increase by 50% just after a few days. And I believe it was Joe Dispenza that was saying this through their studies, that just doing a few days of meditation, that they checked their IgG or IgA levels, and it was 50% higher just through meditation. So the immune system basically was like repairing itself, which is pretty profound in just a couple days. So to relay to people, like, that's the power we have, right?
Yes.
Amazing.
It's all inside. We just need to harness it.
Yeah. So any last words to the people listening to this that who are suffering maybe and need a little bit more inspiration or something else that they can do? They've got meditation down, and maybe something else that you found helpful.
I would say that in terms of the application of the cream, it was like we made that cream for ourselves in terms of how much stress we've gone through.
Yeah.
And what we learned was that the more of the cream that we're applying onto the heart and the back of the neck, and when we're meditating onto our third eye, we're seeing heart coherence information using measurement from heart math. So I have software that measure frustration frequency versus coherent frequency. And I see huge changes between the two, from someone who is in a frustrated, stressful mode versus someone who is in a peaceful, loving, coherent mood. And then that is where we've been focusing on, is really getting people to use it to help them with their daily stress.
Gotcha. So like if they're stressed out, they can just put on the cream, and then all of a sudden it just drops down, or it increases the coherence and then drops down the stress level.
Yes. And it's so simple. But you gotta remember, there's no miracle pills, there's no miracle cream.
Yeah.
But there is miracle in terms of how your body deals with things There's miracle in terms of what you eat, how you live, and what's going on in your mind and how you think. So that is free. It's all inside.
All right. I love that message. And that's the best message. It's all free and it's a miracle. We are living miracles and we have access to all this free stuff all the time. Right. And we're in charge. That's beautiful.
Yes.
So, so TK, Dr. TK, you can find him on Facebook and Instagram at the Mind Body Matrix and online at mindbodymatrix.com. And so it's recovering from minor aches and pains using functional medicine. And that's what the cream is for, is help to harmonize the body, right? And de-stress. And, and guys, whoever's listening, this stuff works. And not only that, not only does it work, but you actually, for every one you sell, you donate one to the military, right? Or something like that.
Yes, we have a buy one, get one to veteran, and that's our passion project. It's really helping our veteran and giving back to them, helping them find a more peaceful, pain-free life.
Yeah. Awesome, man. I love it. All right. Well, here we are with TK. Any last words before we sign off?
No, I appreciate everybody, and everybody find peace.
Awesome. Thank you for joining the Healing Mastery Summit, TK. Have an awesome day.
Thank you, brother.